Alison Osborne, our first time together on the YouTube channel. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me, Doug.
Good. So, State of the Podcast Agencies report by CoHost. Amazing report,
Thank
especially
you.
for the founder of a podcast agency. But I think there's tons in here for podcasters and for brands, really, that would either hire an agency or not, just want to understand their own podcast. Piece of the report is maybe an over-reliance or a stressed reliance on reporting downloads as an important metric for the podcast. And this is so delicate because I don't think downloads are a don't report it or don't pay attention to it thing.
Yes.
But 78% of the agencies responding saying it's a primary metric. Does it feel like maybe there's too much weight on the download, and why?
I think that it makes sense, first of all. And I will also preface with saying that we never think that you shouldn't be measuring downloads. We're not saying throw it to the wayside. But I do think that, and I'm sure many have heard this term being used as well, that they are a bit of a vanity metric. What we mean by that is it's telling us activity, it's telling us maybe a bit about brand awareness and audience size, but it's not getting into that nitty-gritty that helps us make decisions about our podcast. So for example, who is listening? What are they doing when they're listening? Where are they coming from? So how can we continue to grow that audience? It's not telling us any of that key information. Similar to apply it to a website. Website visitors is a great metric to look at, but it's not telling us actionable insights and data for us to move forward for growth of different marketing campaigns. And it's the same thing for podcasts. It's helpful to have that number, but it doesn't give us the insights that we need to grow the podcast.
So it's sort of like going to the doctor and the doctor just saying, well, your EKG shows your vitals are okay. So come back again in 6 months. That says nothing about quality of life and how my life is actually going.
Yes, exactly. So I think if you are only looking at downloads, you're missing so much key information and insights to help your podcast. But again, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't look at them. I do think it's important to report on downloads and have it be one of the metrics. I understand why brands and agencies want to look at it because it's also typically the largest number. So it does look a little
And
nice to have in a
asked,
report.
right? The client says, how are the downloads?
Exactly. And for a long time, it really was the data that we had to run off of. But I think that podcast analytics have come quite a ways and still have a long ways to go. But we now have other insights that we can be looking to as well.
I want to get to the show me parts of the report. Let's have a look at what the agencies had to say when it came to the downloads and three quarters. And if the downloads are just one indicator, what you mentioned some of them, time consumed, who is listening, how long did they listen? Let's talk about some of that.
Yeah. So, as you can see with the report here, we have the 78% of agencies saying that they're still looking at downloads here. I think some other key areas that jump to me is the second one, which is listener feedback. To start, there's really nothing like hearing direct feedback from your audience. That's going to tell you straight of what, number one, maybe who is it exactly, and also what they're liking, not liking about the show. Very actionable insights right there. So it was great for us to see that in 2026, it go from 57 in 2024 to that 75% saying that they're using that metric to evaluate podcasts in 2026. But some of the other insights that I mentioned that I think are so valuable and important is that engagement data. So we're looking at consumption rates, we're looking at listen times, drop-off rates or points in the podcast. Unique listeners are even a valuable metric, as well as pairing that with new listener data. Who is your audience? To me, that's the bread and butter of a podcast. You need to make sure that, especially for a brand, you're reaching exactly who you want to be reaching, because to me, the rest of the metrics don't matter as much if you're not even hitting the right people.
Okay, so this next chart, what it's showing us is how the agencies are trying to help grow client podcasts. And number one being guest promos. Guest promo or promo swaps. I get that. That's long-standing. But number two, this reliance on social media to help grow the podcast. I do have I don't have a single documented case across all of our clients where a heavy inundation of social media, not just views, but engagements, likes, reshares, comments, an engaged social media audience, which is great. I don't think social media helps your podcast. I think your podcast might help your social media. So I'll say it.
Yes.
I'm not sure the agencies are quite. I'm not sure there should be such a weight applied by the agencies to this strategy. I'm not sure how you feel.
It's interesting because I think that on social media specifically, audiences don't typically want to leave the platform. That's where guesting and cross promotions are so powerful because they're already in the listening apps that you would like them to be in. Social media is such a unique one where I think it can be a great support system for your podcast. Or if we change the way that we view listening platforms and almost is that people are consuming clips on podcasts on social media. But sometimes all I get from them is the clips that they share on social media. And to me, that satisfies enough of how much I want to be listening to them. That doesn't mean I don't like the podcast, I'm not dedicated to it, whatever it may be. It's just that's the format that I now consume it the most. So if we change our opinion of how we view social media, of trying to just drive all of our audiences off of social into these listening apps, yeah, I don't know if that's the most effective strategy. Maybe if you just want to get in their minds for them to then search you later, that could also be an effective way. But it is quite a unique one.
You're so right. Maybe we as agencies need to figure out a way to report on their social media success from having the podcast. And so we agree that social media may not help the podcast directly or much, but your podcast might help your social media. So
yes,
that leads me to my next, because ROI, return on investment, is so hard for any branded podcast. If we're agreeing that downloads are a metric and time consumed, awesome, that's a metric. But we need to figure out as agencies, what does our client really want to do? Why are they really doing this podcast? Then how do we really measure it, combined with the challenge that podcasts are okay at the top of the funnel and they're okay at the bottom of the funnel, but my goodness, in the middle, that trust level and the desire level, they're magnificent, but they don't necessarily directly make people do stuff. There's usually something else combined with the podcast that makes them do the stuff. So how do we ROI this, KPI it?
Yeah, it's a question that I think any agency can relate to, and any brand marketer as well, trying to justify the ROI of the podcast too, to continue the show. It's a problem we're all feeling. And how I like to think about it and also view it is that, especially for B2B brands, like, again, I said this earlier, but it comes down to understanding who your audience is and who your listeners are, because I think that's going to be the core of being able to track and measure ROI. Of course, to your point, it comes down to identifying what is the actual goal of the podcast for the brand, and what are they trying to do, because that's going to guide how you're measuring success and KPIs and goals. But I also believe that going back to the downloads conversation, for example, say that you're a B2B brand and you're trying to target CMOs at health tech companies. That's such a specific audience. You're not going to be getting 20,000 downloads an episode. That would be quite crazy if you did. And if you were, that likely means you're not hitting the right audience necessarily. You might be getting 100 downloads an episode, maybe only 50. On paper, that doesn't look the best. It might not be exciting to you. But if you can see that you're hitting those 50 to 100 executive marketers at these very specific companies, to me, that's an amazing ROI. Think of those high profile, high level people in a room. 50 to 100 is a lot. And if you're having them coming back episode over episode, that's amazing. So I would say the understanding the audience is the base for being able to support the ROI conversation, because then it also helps support, like I said, the sales tactics. It helps support pipeline, ABM strategies, and also just ensuring that marketing is targeting the audience that you're setting out to.
We use CoHost for advanced analytics with a number of our clients. And one of the success stories is we found one client who felt they were talking to an audience that was already extremely successful. So the information on the podcast was pretty high tech. Using CoHost advanced analytics, what we were able to find was the average listener was making about $75K listening to this investment related podcast. That tells me good people, smart people, but they're in that 401k, how to get out of my 401k kind of world. And it changed the way the client did their podcast, and that led to greater success. Where do you, that's one use of CoHost advanced analytics. Where do you see analytics going in the future? And you talked on some of this because it's understanding the client understanding the audience and what they want the audience specifically to do. Where are we going with analytics in the next 5 years? And I guess I'll throw in, how is AI going to impact some of that?
I think that it is continuing down the road that, at least how we see it, continuing down the road that we're already driving down. And I love that example that you gave. I know you shared it to us earlier as well, like many months ago when it originally happened. And I continue to use that example because I think that it's such a powerful way to use the data, and not always necessarily a way that people think to use it, to really analyze and say, okay, why is our engagement rate low? Most people are like, change up the content, like make it shorter, remove this ad, or like those types of fixes. Whereas,
they have a sponsor now, by the way, for their podcast. They're so successful.
And that's amazing to hear. Whereas it was an audience issue, it was an audience alignment issue. So I just have to add that. I've always loved that example. But I think, and I don't mean to keep hammering down on the audience piece, but I think it's continuing to be able to connect the podcast back to who actually is listening, how they're acting on the podcast. So I think we're already making headway there with engagement data around new listeners and consumption and those pieces. And then also, I mean, brands want attribution at the end of the day. At least that's what we hear most often, is let's directly connect the podcast to the results that we're seeing in other areas of the business. So being able to connect those pieces of the puzzle for them to the best of our ability is where we would like to be heading. And I think that where the analytics space, at least for brands, is heading to. So yeah, in short, I would say attribution, audience, engagement.
Perfect. I really appreciate your time today, Alison. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It was great chatting.